Amara Carter had spent the entire morning rehearsing this moment in her head. She could see it all clearly. The sleek glass doors of Oak Ridge National Bank, the confident, measured steps she would take as she walked up to the counter, the feeling of pride as she handed over her scholarship check, earned through nothing but her own hard work and determination. It was supposed to be an ordinary transaction, something simple, just another task in the grand scheme of things. But as she approached the entrance of the bank, a sharp nervousness crept into her chest. Today wasn't just any day. It wasn't every day that a 16-year-old high school senior stood in front of a bank, prepared to deposit a check for $10,000. It was a scholarship check, a reward for her academic achievements, her dedication, and her resolve to prove herself. And yet, as she paused for a moment before opening the door, the weight of what this check represented seemed to grow heavier. Amara straightened her blazer and tugged at the edges of her skirt, smoothing out any creases in her uniform. She had worked for this moment, every sleepless night, every academic challenge, and she would not let it be tainted by the growing unease she felt in her gut. But before we continue this story, we want you to like this video, comment where you're watching us from, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world, and it helps us share more impactful stories like this. Now, let's get back to the story. The bank's interior was immaculate. Polished marble floors reflected the bright lights overhead, and the scent of expensive perfume lingered in the air. The sound of low murmurs filled the space as a few well-dressed customers milled around, waiting for their transactions to be processed. The bank looked exactly how Amara imagined it would. Formal, professional, and impersonal. She stepped up to the counter, clutching the envelope in her hand, a feeling of pride and anticipation building in her chest. As she approached, a young teller looked up from his paperwork. His name tag read Rachel. At first, Rachel offered a polite smile, but as her gaze drifted from Amara's face to the envelope in her hand, that smile quickly faded into something else, something hard to place. Amara felt the brief but intense scrutiny from Rachel as the teller's eyes lingered on her for a second too long. Rachel's voice broke the silence. "How can I help you?" she asked, but there was an underlying note of suspicion, one that Amara picked up on immediately. "I'm here to deposit a scholarship check," Amara replied, placing the envelope carefully on the counter. "It's for $10,000. Rachel's eyes flicked from the check to Amara's face, then back to the check, and then back to Amara once more. The look in her eyes seemed to shift, becoming colder and more scrutinizing. "A $10,000 check?" Rachel echoed, her voice slightly raised. "For someone your age?" Amara's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this reaction. Surely, someone her age could receive a scholarship check, especially one earned through merit. This was no handout. It was a direct result of her own hard work and determination. But Rachel's tone suggested otherwise. "Yes, that's correct," Amara said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the anxiety starting to bubble up inside her. "It's from Oak Ridge University. I earned it." Rachel looked down at the check again, and Amara could have sworn she saw a faint look of disbelief cross her face. But instead of responding, Rachel turned her attention to the manager nearby, Marissa, a woman in her mid-40s who had been watching the exchange from across the room. Rachel's voice became low and sharp as she addressed Marissa. "A $10,000 check? For a teenager?" Rachel said, her words pointed. "Should we be concerned about this?" Amara's stomach sank. The unspoken words hung in the air like an accusation. She could feel her hands trembling, despite her best efforts to keep composed. She had worked so hard for this scholarship, and yet, here she was, being treated like an outsider. Marissa's eyes flicked over to Amara, her gaze cold and calculating. "Where did she get this check from?" Marissa asked, her tone dismissive. "We need to verify everything. We've had too many fraudulent checks recently." Amara's face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and anger. Fraudulent checks? What was going on here? She had done everything right. She had earned the scholarship fair and square. And yet, here she was, being treated like a criminal. "Please," Amara said, her voice trembling slightly as she clutched the envelope tighter. "I have all the documentation right here. I can show you my award letter, my student ID, everything. She slid the documents across the counter, desperate to prove herself. Rachel took the documents without a word, inspecting them with an exaggerated care, as if they were somehow beneath her. The moment stretched on for what felt like an eternity, and Amara couldn't help but feel like she was under a microscope. She wanted to speak up, to demand an explanation, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Her pride, her need to maintain composure, was keeping her silent, but seething inside. Amara stood at the counter, her back straight, her chest tight. Every second felt like an hour as Rachel disappeared into the back office with the documents. The silence in the bank seemed deafening now, and Amara felt herself growing smaller with every passing moment. She tried to steady her breath, but her thoughts were racing. Why was this happening? What had she done wrong? She had prepared for this day, practiced how she would present herself, how she would handle the check. This was supposed to be a simple deposit, nothing more. But instead of feeling like a young adult taking charge of her future, Amara felt humiliated, exposed. The way Rachel had looked at her, as though she didn't belong here, was one thing. But now Marissa was involved, and everything seemed to be spiraling out of control. She glanced around, desperate to take her mind off the situation. The customers in the bank were either absorbed in their own transactions or engaged in hushed conversations. None of them seemed to notice her standing there, but Amara could feel their eyes on her, feel them judging her. Her pulse quickened as she realized she hadn't been given a seat or any form of acknowledgement. She had been left to stand at the counter like an inconvenience, ignored by the staff. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Minutes passed, and yet there was no sign of Rachel or Marissa returning. Every second felt like a cruel reminder that she was being treated differently. In that moment, Amara felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't a simple miscommunication. This was something deeper, something more insidious. She wasn't being treated as a customer. She was being treated as an outsider. As the minutes dragged on, Amara's thoughts began to spiral. Her fingers clutched the edge of the counter, gripping it tightly in an attempt to hold herself together. Her stomach churned with a growing sense of discomfort, her heart racing as she watched the door to the back office swing open once more. But it wasn't Rachel or Marissa. It was a new face, a man who looked to be in his mid-30s, wearing a sharp suit. His expensive shoes clicked against the marble floor as he walked toward the counter. He barely glanced at her as he passed, but his presence in the bank added to the already palpable tension. Amara couldn't help but wonder what was happening behind closed doors. Was her scholarship being questioned because of who she was? Because of the color of her skin? Or was this just poor service? Every nerve in her body screamed that something wasn't right. As the minutes turned into what felt like an eternity, Amara felt herself shrinking. Her legs grew tired from standing, but she forced herself to remain still, to remain composed. She had been taught to act with grace in the face of adversity. This was her moment to show that she could handle it, that she was in control. But inside, a storm of emotions raged. She glanced at the clock on the wall, noting that it had been at least 20 minutes since she handed over her check. 20 minutes, each second ticked louder than the last. In that time, she had seen more than enough. The elderly couple that had entered earlier, the ones who were greeted so warmly, were already finished with their transaction and moving toward the door. Not a single moment of hesitation. They had been treated with the utmost respect. And yet here she was, standing in the corner, unable to move or speak up. Why wasn't I treated like them? Amara thought bitterly. Why wasn't I just seen as another customer? Her hands were trembling now, but she couldn't bring herself to touch her phone. It was still sitting in her locker at school, something she had forgotten in her rush to get to the bank. Her mother had always warned her about the dangers of being unprepared, but this was the first time she wished she had listened more carefully. It felt like every part of her was out of her control, like the world was spinning too fast for her to catch up. As she stood there, she could feel her patience wearing thin. Her sense of justice, that quiet resolve that had driven her all these years, was beginning to crack. How could they treat her like this? How could they question me, someone who worked so hard? The longer she stood there, the more the stares of the other customers began to weigh on her. She overheard bits and pieces of conversations around her. Some of them dismissive, others curious, but none of them offering any comfort. People she had never met before seemed to be judging her based on nothing more than her appearance. Her heart sank with the realization. None of this was about her check. It was about her. It was about how the world perceived her. Her internal monologue was interrupted when Rachel returned, holding the check in her hand. But instead of looking at Amara, Rachel immediately handed it over to Marissa, who had come out from the back office. "Everything in order?" Marissa asked, her voice clipped, though her eyes remained suspicious. Rachel nodded, but there was a hesitation in her movements. "Are you sure this is legitimate?" Marissa continued, glancing briefly at Amara before turning back to Rachel. "She's awfully young to have this much money, don't you think?" Amara felt her heart drop as Marissa's words hit her like a slap across the face. It wasn't just the skepticism about the check. It was the judgment in her voice, the assumption that someone like Amara couldn't possibly deserve the scholarship. The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Amara's mind raced, but she couldn't come up with the right words to say. She wanted to speak, to tell them exactly who she was and what she had accomplished, but all she could do was stand there and listen to their whispers. "You don't think she's trying to scam us, do you?" Rachel asked, her voice lowering. Marissa's eyes met Amara's briefly, her gaze cold and dismissive. "We'll need to verify everything," she said flatly, not even acknowledging Amara's presence as she walked away again. It was as if Amara had become invisible to them. The minutes stretched into an hour, and still, there was no sign of the check being processed. By now, Amara had long since stopped trying to understand the reasoning behind their delay. She had moved beyond confusion into a state of quiet, simmering anger. It was clear to her now that her race was a factor in the treatment she was receiving. It wasn't the check itself. It was her. In the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of Marissa speaking quietly to a man at the far end of the bank. He looked like a regular customer, well-dressed, sharply tailored suit, hairstyled just so. But there was something different about him, something that caught Amara's attention. Marissa's tone shifted as she spoke to him, leaning in close as she handed him a manila folder. The folder was marked confidential, and though Amara couldn't make out the words, she could see that the man's expression was serious, even pleased. Something about the exchange felt off. Amara couldn't help herself. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she edged closer, her eyes narrowing as she tried to hear what they were discussing. From what she could catch, the man was speaking in hushed tones. His name, she heard, was Harrison Wells. The name rang a bell. She had overheard her mother mention him before. Harrison Wells was the CEO of a rival financial firm that had been in a heated battle for clients with her mother's company. As Amara pieced together the fragmented conversation, a chilling realization hit her. This wasn't just poor customer service. This was corporate sabotage. The folder in Harrison Wells's hands was filled with confidential information, likely information her mother's firm had worked years to build. Marissa was giving it to him. The weight of this discovery hit Amara like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about a check. It wasn't about a fraudulent transaction. It was about something much more sinister. Marissa had been working with Wells to undermine her mother's business, and Amara had witnessed it firsthand. Just as Amara's mind was reeling from the implications of what she had overheard, the doors to the bank swung open, and her mother stepped inside. Naomi Carter's presence was magnetic. With her poised, confident stride and impeccably tailored suit, she commanded respect in any room she entered. Amara's breath caught in her throat. Her mother's arrival was like a beacon of strength, and Amara's shoulders relaxed as she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Naomi's eyes found her immediately, narrowing with concern when she saw her daughter standing in the corner, isolated and tense. Naomi wasted no time. She walked straight toward the counter, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The staff straightened as she approached, and Amara could see Rachel and Marissa exchange a glance. Naomi was a force to be reckoned with, and they knew it. Naomi turned to Marissa, her voice calm but sharp. "What's going on here?" Marissa stammered for a moment, clearly caught off guard by Naomi's commanding presence. "Miss Carter, I didn't realize you were coming today," she said nervously. "We were just processing your daughter's transaction." "I'm sure you were," Naomi said, her tone icy. "But why has my daughter been standing here for over an hour with no explanation? Why hasn't her check been processed yet?" Naomi's voice carried weight. There was no escaping her authority, and it was clear that Marissa was floundering under the pressure. Amara stepped forward, finally releasing the breath she had been holding. "Mom, they've been treating me like I'm a criminal. I don't know what's going on, but this isn't just about a simple deposit. They've been questioning everything. My check, my age, my right to be here." She hesitated for a moment, her voice shaking. "It's because of how I look. It's because I'm black." Naomi's expression hardened as she took in the full extent of the situation. She placed a reassuring hand on Amara's shoulder and then turned her full attention back to Marissa. "You owe my daughter an apology," Naomi said firmly, her voice unwavering. "And I think you owe me an explanation for this behavior." As Naomi's words sank in, the tension in the room was palpable. Marissa's face drained of color, and Rachel shifted nervously from one foot to the other. Naomi didn't break eye contact as she addressed them, her gaze unflinching. "I know exactly what you've been doing, Marissa," Naomi continued, her voice icy. "This isn't just poor customer service. You've been conspiring with Harrison Wells. You've been passing along confidential documents from my firm to a competitor. And now you've decided to use my daughter as a pawn in your game." The room fell silent as Naomi's words echoed through the bank. Marissa opened her mouth to defend herself, but Naomi cut her off before she could speak. "I'll be reporting this immediately," Naomi said, her voice firm with authority. "And I expect you to be removed from your position immediately. You'll have no further involvement in this institution. I'll see to it." The security guard, who had been standing near the door, stepped forward at Naomi's request. "Please escort Miss Marissa Hayes out," Naomi said, her voice cool and unwavering. As Marissa was escorted from the building, Naomi turned back to Amara. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Amara looked up at her mother, her heart swelling with pride. She had been humiliated, yes, but she had also been empowered by the truth. And with her mother by her side, she had uncovered something far bigger than herself. "This isn't over," Naomi said, as she turned to the rest of the room. "I'll make sure that this institution undergoes a full review. No one should ever be treated this way. No one should ever feel like they don't belong." As Naomi spoke, Amara realized something profound. She wasn't just the daughter of a powerful CEO. She was a young woman who could make a difference, who could fight for what was right, even in the face of adversity. And in that moment, she understood that her journey was just beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story and want to see more content like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue telling powerful stories that matter. Share your thoughts below. What did you think of Amara's journey? We'd love to hear your opinions. See you in the next video.